Reflections on the Emperor's Letter. New obstacles started by Sir Hudson Lowe. From Tuesday, December 17th to Thursday, the 19th, 1816, the Emperor's Letter proved a source of real consolation to me. It was continually present in my thoughts. It dissipated my alarms, strengthened my resolution, and in short, it rendered me truly happy. I read it carefully over and over again. I weighed every word of it. From my own knowledge of the Emperor, I thought I could guess how he had been induced to write it. I could conceive what would be his uneasiness respecting the cause of my removal and his surprise on hearing of the clandestine correspondence. From his constant habit of considering things in every possible point of view, I felt convinced that his penetration had enabled him to discover precisely what had taken place, and that he had determined to write to me in consequence. My conjectures on all these points proved to be correct, for I afterwards learned that the Emperor, after some delay, had determined to write me, without knowing what might be the nature of the papers which caused my arrest. Need I say how dearly I prized this letter? I, who had so frequently heard the Emperor declare that he would not write to his wife, his mother, or his brothers, since he could not do so without having his letters opened and read by his jailers. But my letter had been opened with his own consent and with his own hands. For after it was sent to Sir Hudson Lowe by the officer on guard, it was returned with the observation that it could not be delivered to me until it should be read and approved by the governor. The Emperor was reclining on his sofa at the moment when the letter was brought back to him. With this new obstacle, he uttered not a word, but raising his hand over his head, he took the letter, broke the seal, and immediately returned it without even looking at the person who presented it. Another circumstance which rendered this letter valuable in my eyes was that it bore the Emperor's full signature, and I knew how much he disliked to sign his name at length. In the new circumstances in which he was placed, this, I believe, was the first time he had signed his full name at full length since he had been at St. Helena, and from an inspection of the original, it is easy to perceive that it cost him some degree of consideration. At first, he wrote with his own hand merely the date, Longwood, December 11th, 1816, concluding with his usual cipher, but conceiving this to be insufficient, he added lower down, your devoted Napoleon, repeating his cipher. The whole bears evident traces of having been written under feelings of embarrassment. But the greatest satisfaction which the Emperor's letter afforded me was that it pointed out precisely the course which I had previously determined upon adopting. I entreat you, and in case of urgency, I command you to quit the island, said the Emperor, and this was exactly what I had resolved to do during the first days of my seclusion, while separated from all my friends and having no counselor but myself. I could no longer, I thought, be of any great service to the Emperor here, but I may perhaps be useful to him elsewhere. I will go to England and appeal to the ministers. They cannot suspect my conduct to be premeditated, seeing that I have been snatched, as it were, from sudden death. Whatever I say will evidently come from my heart. I will paint the truth, and they cannot but be touched with the miseries I shall unfold to them. They will ameliorate the condition of the illustrious captive, and I will myself return and lay at his feet the consolation which my zeal will have procured. I therefore resume my prayers and entreaties, and a circumstance which the more induced me to do so was that my son had just then been seized with a relapse, and had been for half an hour in a state of insensibility, without any other assistance than I was capable of affording him. My distress and anxiety may be easily conceived, and I was myself very much indisposed. I wrote a letter to the governor in which I said, you reduce me to the utmost possible misery. What a terrible responsibility you are taking upon yourself. You are a father, and alarms like those which now distress me may perhaps one day remind you of my unavailing entreaties. It was evident that by detaining us, he was hurrying us to our graves. I was unable to conceive what could induce him thus to involve himself in new difficulties. It appeared to me most natural that he should prefer letting us die elsewhere. Sir Hudson Lowe called that very day. He said the note he had received respecting my son's health was the occasion of his visit. He had sent for Dr. Baxter, who arrived soon after him. In the course of a long conversation, I could very well discern that Sir Hudson Lowe had now some secret object in view with respect to me. We reciprocally sounded each other on various points, and the governor concluded by observing that he could not send me back to England because I insisted on carrying my journal along with me. While, on the other hand, it was claimed by the emperor, as it had been written by his order, the cunning and absurdity of this reasoning were sufficiently obvious. Then, as if seized by a sudden thought and a momentary feeling of condescension, he added that if I wished to return to Longwood, he would very willingly agree to it. I trembled to hear this. However, recollecting the letter and the significant words of the emperor, I replied that though the idea of returning to Longwood was wholly contrary to my present intention, yet if the emperor expressed a desire to that effect, I should immediately change my resolution. Sir Hudson Lowe observed that he had good reason to believe the emperor did wish for my return. The governor's thoughts were evidently occupied with some new scheme or other respecting me, but I could not guess what it was. I signified that it would be necessary for me to write to Longwood to learn what were the emperor's wishes. To this the governor did not positively object, but he expressed himself with the utmost obscurity. At length he departed, at least I supposed him gone. He had, however, merely withdrawn for a time to hold a conference with his confidential officer, after which he came to inform me that, having considered the business, he thought it advisable for me to write to the Grand Marshal on the subject of my return to Longwood, at the same time observing that according to the manner in which I might express myself in my letter, the emperor would or would not be induced to signify a wish for my return. This was very certain, and I could not but smile at the observation. Wishing to record the most important points of our long conversation, and in the hope of bringing matters to a conclusion, I addressed the following letter to Sir Hudson Lowe immediately after he left me. Sir, I recollect that during your visit to me, when speaking of the circumstances which had withheld you from coming to any determination respecting me, you observed that one of the obstacles which prevented you from sending me to Europe was that my journal, which I insisted on taking with me, had at the same time been claimed at Longwood. With this twofold demand, you said it was out of your power to comply. I have no doubt, sir, that you, in your wisdom, have had good reasons for suffering this difficulty to subsist when you might so easily have obviated it. Every word, every hint from Longwood is my supreme law. I should have immediately renounced my papers on being made acquainted with the emperor's demand, and probably that demand would have ceased had my wish been communicated to Longwood. At all events, I shall esteem it as a favor if you will be pleased to convey to the emperor my sentiments on this subject as a mark of my profound and everlasting respect, and with the view of obviating further difficulty. The more I reflect, the more I am astonished that so simple and unimportant an affair as mine should have given rise to so much discussion. This will only serve to encourage and to impart a greater degree of probability to the idea that my two clandestine letters were merely the pretense, and my other papers the real cause of your conduct, and a circumstance which will particularly prejudice your character in this affair is the great interest which you seem to have taken in obtaining my journal, a portion of which relates to yourself personally. By refusing to send me to England, you but confirm the suspicion that you are afraid lest your conduct here should reach the ears of your countrymen. You ought rather to have been thankful for the opportunity I should have afforded you of solemnly proving the contrary. I should have furnished you with the means of completely clearing yourself. All this, however, belongs entirely to the jurisdiction of moral feeling and opinion. A fact that is more positive as belonging to the direct jurisdiction of the laws is that you kept in solitary confinement for several months until the return of answers, which you expected from England, a man who, having withdrawn himself from his voluntarily subjection to you and formerly demanded leave to quit the island, reduced himself to this simple dilemma. You are exercising over me an arbitrary act. I call upon you to observe the laws. If I am not guilty, send me away. If I am, deliver me up to justice and let me take my trial. But you mention papers which you have in your possession. If these papers are unconnected with the matter in question, restore them to me. If they are connected with it, consign them to my judges and me along with them. But these papers, you tell me, are claimed by another individual. I shall renounce them whenever you may make me acquainted with his wish, or probably that individual will relinquish his claim whenever you make him acquainted with mine. The whole business is reduced to these simple questions. However, the great object of my letter is to request that you will be pleased to convey to Longwood a new proof of my respect for the Emperor. As to writing to Longwood myself respecting the favor of returning thither, as you suggested, I shall wait until I have the honor of seeing you again before I make up my mind on the subject. The 20th and the 21st. Sir Hudson Lowe, harassed by my incessant appeals to him and perplexed by the awkward situation in which he had placed himself, began apparently to repent of having made so much noise about so trifling a matter. He evidently wished to see me return to the Emperor, which of course would have relieved him of all embarrassment and would have put an end to the whole business. Consequently, with the view of inducing me the more speedily to adopt this step, the governor addressed me the official decision respecting my removal to the Cape of Good Hope. And this document he accompanied by a letter in which he once more mentioned, in a very studied language, the facility he afforded me of returning to Longwood. I've avoided, as far as possible, inserting the documents connected with this correspondence, and have abridged several of my own letters through the fear of fatiguing the reader. However, it is proper that I should produce all that is necessary for the explanation of this affair, and I therefore subjoin the official decision and the letter to which I have just alluded. Declaration. The governor, having duly considered all the circumstances relative to the affair of Count Las Casas, has adopted the following decision. Count Las Casas, having committed a direct and premeditated violation of the regulation established in St. Helena by virtue of the authority of the British government relative to General Bonaparte in corrupting the fidelity of an inhabitant of the island so far as to render him in a criminal and underhand way the bearer of secret and clandestine letters for Europe, and having thus broken one of the indispensable conditions to which he voluntarily acquiesced when he signed his declaration to obtain leave to reside at St. Helena. The said Count Las Casas has been separated from the person of General Bonaparte, and in conformity with the instructions of the British government, he will be transported to the Cape of Good Hope. Count Las Casas is permitted to take with him all his property and papers, excepting, however, such of the latter as may have reference to General Bonaparte since the time he has been under the authority of the British government, and also such correspondence as may not have passed through the official channels of the English authorities. The governor will await the orders of the British government respecting those papers, the nature of which may be a subject of dispute. Hudson Lowe. Letter from Hudson Lowe, which accompanied the preceding document. Sir, in communicating to you the enclosed decision, permit me to mention what I have already stated verbally, that I shall make no objection to your remaining on the island if you prefer to do so, rather than proceed to the Cape of Good Hope, there to wait until I receive instructions from the British government respecting you. In case you should prefer remaining at St. Helena, I conceive it necessary to require from you a declaration expressing your wish to that effect, and a promise to submit to the same restrictions under which you have hitherto been permitted to reside here. Thus, sir, it is entirely at your own option either to proceed to the Cape of Good Hope or to remain here with your papers under seal until I shall receive instruction from the government. Hudson Lowe. I immediately acknowledged the receipt of these 2 documents, at the same time requesting an acknowledgement of the receipt of all my letters, for as yet I had had no intimation of any one of them having been received. Wishing to reply to the governor's offer of allowing me to return to Longwood, I instantly addressed a letter on this subject to the Grand Marshal, which I sent to Sir Hudson Lowe, in order that he might peruse it and forward it to its destination. The following is the substance of the letter. Sir, the governor, with great politeness and interest, has offered to permit me to return to Longwood. On my declining to avail myself of this offer, and observing that I could not return thither except by the express wish of the Emperor, Sir H. Lowe remarked that he had reason to believe the Emperor wished for my return. This wish, sir, would be my supreme law. It would overwhelm my heart and would instantly subdue the firmness with which I have resolved to endure inexpressible hardships from respect to the laws and to my character. Meanwhile, before I receive the expression of such a wish on the part of the Emperor, which I invoke with all my heart, I shall feel happy in being enabled to make you acquainted with the motives which influenced my first refusal. I therefore request that the governor will be pleased to communicate to you my correspondence with him dated the 30th of November and the 2nd, the 4th, and the 18th of December. He cannot surely object to a thing which will be satisfactory to us and perfectly indifferent to them. For if I return to Longwood, I shall myself have the opportunity of making you acquainted with these letters, and if I do not return, you will know their contents. It is true, but that will be a matter of little importance, since not being able to communicate together, it will be out of our power to derive any respective advantage from them. The only real result, therefore, would be the satisfaction I should enjoy in making known to you my opinions and sentiments on this occasion. My gratitude would be perfect, and the generosity of the governor complete, if he would explain to me that my return to Longwood would be in no manner prejudicial to my interests legally considered, and would be wholly unconnected with his own. And this he might do very easily. Be this as it may, sir, all these considerations would vanish should a single word or sign from the Emperor permit me to return to his presence and enjoy the happiness of which I am now deprived. I shall hasten to throw myself at his feet the moment I receive permission. All this would be only for my own gratification. It would spring entirely from my own sentiments, but my attachment to the Emperor and my profound respect for his wishes are stronger than these feelings. It will scarcely be credited that Sir Hudson Lowe sent back this letter. He had drawn a pencil mark across every passage to which he objected, and had reduced the whole thing to a few lines, thus assuming the privilege of dictating to me what I was to write to Count Bertrand. The return letter was accompanied by the following communication, which the governor observed would serve as an answer to all my preceding correspondence. Sir, I consider the letter and decision which I had the honor to address to you yesterday as a general answer to the different arguments contained in your correspondence with me. It was, sir, the state of your son's health and the complication of troubles, mental and bodily, so forcibly described in your letters of the 6th and 7th instant, which induced me, on the receipt of the letter, to wait upon you in person and offer you permission to return to Longwood, where you might constantly procure medical aid, of the want of which I have never heard any complaint during the whole time of your residence there. A sentiment of consideration for the individual from whom you have been separated also influences me in making this offer. I cannot, however, consent to become the medium of any discussion or negotiation which you may wish to maintain on this subject with the individuals at Longwood. The only communication which I can authorize will be that for the purpose of ascertaining whether your return be wished for, on the conditions attached to the prolongation of your residence on the island, such as I have expressed them to you in my letter of yesterday. Communications on this point, with a brief summary to the general, are all that I could take upon me to transmit A permission of returning to Longwood implies the necessity of a candid explanation on every point. In case you should not return, I conceive that to render myself the channel for prolonged correspondence on the subject in question would be a fresh ground of irritation and inconvenience to all parties. A great variety of details entirely personal and foreign to the question, which are contained in your different letters, do not appear to me to require any official reply. These letters are at the same time so mingled up with the manner that they may be considered as bearing an official character that one cannot remain unanswered any more than another. To enter into so many minute particulars would require more leisure than a multiplicity of other business will permit me to devote to such a purpose. I am at present putting together some observations on the whole of your correspondence, and I will send you a copy of them when finished. I may even communicate them to Longwood. In the meanwhile, the decision which I have sent you and the letter by which it was accompanied must serve as a reply to all your communications. I return your letter addressed to Count Bertrand. I have underlined several passages which appear to me to be very much out of place, or which it would at least be useless to communicate. H. Lowe. The 22nd through the 23rd, the governor came to ascertain the effect of his declaration and his 2 letters. He doubted not, but they had produced a great impression, and he calculated on finding my letter to the Grand Marshal ready written, with the corrections he had suggested, which communication he expected would bring about my return to Longwood. But I coolly informed him that since he had taken upon himself to dictate to me, I would not write at all. At this he appeared surprised and disconcerted, and after some reflection he went so far as to inquire whether the corrections which he had made were the only obstacles that deterred me. This unusual condescension on his part was a sufficient guide for me. I therefore continued firm and cut the matter short by observing that in the evening he should receive from me my irrevocable determination and the reasons on which it was grounded, together with my remarks on the different letters which he had addressed to me. I wished by this means to avoid fugitive verbal observations, which are always easily denied. I preferred recording on paper what I had to say. My letter was as follows. Sir, you have sent back to me with your corrections the letter which I wrote to Count Bertrand, respecting your verbal offer of granting me permission to return to Longwood. But as it almost always happens here, this offer was sincere only in appearance, and it was doomed to expire in the details of its execution. I was not much surprised at this. After your departure the other day, when I came to reflect on the offer you had made, I foresaw that the matter would terminate as it really has done. You had the candor to tell me that you could not permit me and the individuals at Longwood to combine our ideas, or, in other words, to ascertain our real wishes. You have doubtless very good reasons for this. I say nothing against it, only I cannot suffer myself to be duped, or to be the means of leading into error those who take an interest in my fate. You are too advantageously situated, sir, between Longwood and me, and if I must write to Count Bertrand, not my own sentiments, but what you may think proper to dictate, I decline holding any communication with him. I shall regard your offer as never having been made, because it cannot possibly be accepted, and I must refer irrevocably for my thoughts, sentiments, and decisions on this subject to my letter of the 30th of November. You mistake, sir, if you suppose that I wished for answers to all the arguments and articles contained in my letters. I am aware of the importance of your occupations and the value of your time, and I therefore merely requested an acknowledgement of the receipt of my letters for the sake of regularity. I presumed you could have no reason to refuse this. You seem surprised, sir, at the deplorable state of my own and my son's health, and you twice express astonishment that I should not have complained to you on the subject when I was at Longwood. I thought but little about my health, sir, when I was at Longwood, and besides, when I felt indisposed, I considered it more advisable to complain to the doctor than to the governor. With regard to my son, I am surprised you should have heard nothing of this situation, considering the consultations that have been held on his case, the fits he has suffered, and the many times he has been bled. It is to be wondered at if our present circumstances is that what is increasing our infirmities. I now come to your orders for my removal to the Cape. I find that all the papers which have any reference to the august individual to whom I have devoted my existence are to be detained. What other papers, sir, can I be possessed of? What is meant by saying that if I'm free to carry away all the rest? Is not this making an offer, and yet granting nothing? You detain my journal, the sole and real object of all this misunderstanding, the depository, yet incomplete and incorrect, in which I daily registered all that I thought, saw, or heard. Can any of my papers be more valuable to me than this? You cannot pretend to have been ignorant of its contents, since I suffered you to peruse it for 2 hours at your own discretion. Will you not be responsible for having abused this privilege? Will you not perhaps one day have to justify yourself for the false notions which you have doubtless transmitted to the English ministers respecting this manuscript? You have called it a political journal. I had no right, you have observed, in the situation in which I was placed, to keep any account of what was said by the Emperor Napoleon. And you particularly object to my having introduced official documents into my journal, as if all that I saw, read, and heard did not by right and without impropriety belong to my own thoughts and form a part of my own property, so long as the record was kept private and secret. Who would suppose that such principles could have been imbibed amidst the liberal ideas of England? Do they not rather partake of the odious police maxims of the continent? And after all, what are the contents of this journal? It describes the sublime language and conduct of the august individual who is the object of it, the incidents of his life, and also many things which are probably not very agreeable to you, but who will have given publicity to these facts. The whole was to have been retouched, altered, and corrected. Who has prevented this? However, sir, you may rest assured that the circumstances which have just taken place shall never induce me to say anything concerning you which I do not firmly believe to be true. In your decision of the 20th of October, you declare that I shall be removed from Longwood and sent to the Cape of Good Hope. From the form and language of this decision, it might naturally be supposed that it was hostile to my wishes. Well, in reality, you thereby pronounce a sentence which is now and has been for many days past foreign to the new question that has risen up between us. You remove from Longwood one who 20 days ago withdrew from the subjection of your authority in which he had voluntarily placed himself, and who for the last 18 days has been formally demanding his removal from the island. Who would ever guess these facts from a perusal of your document? You enclose your decision in a letter in which you leave me the choice of submitting to your sentence or returning to Longwood, but by embracing the happiness which you thus hold out to me, I should secure to you the triumph and satisfaction of being master of my most private papers. I should again become your captive, and should be liable to the same searches and seizures whenever you might be pleased to make them. No, sir, I can make no choice. I can only repeat what I have already said before. I resign myself to the laws. If I am guilty, let me be tried. If I am not guilty, restore me to liberty. If my papers are unconnected with this affair, return them to me. If you think it proper to submit them to serious examination, transmit them to the English ministers, and let me be sent with them. Besides, it's my own and my son's health imperiously require every kind of medical assistance. I earnestly implore you to send us to England. Nothing was more simple than this affair, and yet it has been involved in difficulty. In vain you refer to your instructions. They never can be made to apply to cases so peculiar as this. Your own wavering determination proves to me that your instructions are neither clear nor precise. You wished at first to keep me on the island in solitary confinement and separated from Longwood. You did not think it right to send me to the Cape. You now torture the literal meaning of your instructions in order to give them a forced interpretation, but recollect that you will be held responsible to your government for having misconstrued them, and to me for having violated the law in my person. Recollect that most of your measures will ultimately appear to have been vexatious and arbitrary acts. I know not what rights, what resources your laws will afford me, but I slumber in this ignorance, for I trust they will protect me in some way or another. You expect to be rid of me when I shall be removed to the Cape, separated from my papers, which you intend to detain in your possession. But even should I be kept a prisoner there, the winds shall waft my complaints hitherward. I will make known the mental wounds and bodily sufferings which you will thus have been the means of aggravating. For if I should be detained at the Cape, it must be through you, either by your direct orders or secret instructions. Sealed papers cannot be opened except in the presence of the party interested. Will you have me brought back from the Cape for the purpose of breaking the seals that are affixed to mine, or will you detain me at the Cape until you receive orders to send my papers to England? What object is to be gained by all this? There was, and still is, a simple mode of arranging everything. My natural disposition to accommodate made me, as it were, anticipate every difficulty. I was ready to obviate all. I would willingly have subjected myself in England to any preliminary measures, however arbitrary, that might have been equivalent to the quarantine of the Cape. The state of my own and my son's health was a valid reason for so doing. The fear of departing from the literal meaning of any particular point in your instructions has with you been more powerful than the necessity and the right of yielding to the spirit, to the force of circumstance, and to the feelings of humanity. It is not yet too late to grant what I solicit. I am willing to believe that humanity will determine you, and if so, I shall remain your debtor. The circumstance of the papers being claimed at Longwood and by me cannot be regarded as a reasonable obstacle. Besides, it may be asked what you have done to remove it. Do you wish that I should myself write on the subject? 3 words would suffice to bring us to an understanding. At all events, sir, whatever determination you may come to, whatever vexation you may reserve for me, nothing can be comparable to what I suffer in being detained on this horrible island, separated from the august individual whom I followed hither. The hours and minutes that I pass in this situation are like years in my unfortunate life, and dangerously aggravate my son's precarious state of health. I therefore again demand, and shall incessantly demand, that you will remove me from this hated place. The governor was very much vexed by my determination of not returning to Longwood, though I could not exactly guess the reason why. However, my resolution was fully confirmed on the following day, when he came to me, and after a long and very obscure preamble respecting his sincerity and good intentions, he told me that to facilitate my communication with Longwood, he would consent to forward my first letter to Count Bertrand in the form in which I had myself written it, and moreover to send along with it a copy of all my correspondence, a thing which he had hitherto constantly refused to do. But the more he made concessions, the more firmly I rejected them. 'Tis too late, said I. The die is cast. I have pronounced sentence upon myself. I will not write to Longwood, and I demand for the 100th time that you will remove me hence without further delay. At least then, said the governor, will you communicate to Longwood my offers and your refusal. I have no objection to do that, I replied. Sir Hudson Lowe then departed very much disconcerted, mentioning at a last inducement that he could only send us away on board a transport, that he did not know when the vessel might sail, and that there was no medical man on board, which would be a serious inconvenience considering the state of my son's health. The 24th. My son was exceedingly ill during the night, and I was myself very much indisposed at daybreak. I sent to request the immediate attendance of Doctors Baxter and O'Meara, and in the extremity of my despair, I also wrote to Sir Hudson Lowe, assuring him it was impossible we could longer endure the treatment we were now suffering. I reminded him that in spite of my son's dangerous condition, it was now more than 7 days since we had seen a medical attendant, and that owing to our inconvenient situation, the doctors, in spite of their good intentions, found it impossible to visit us. I therefore urged the necessity of our quitting the cottage without delay, and I begged that we might be conveyed to the town, even to the common jail, if you found it necessary. This letter produced an immediate effect. I received on the return of the orderly a note from the governor, stating that I should that day be conveyed to his own residence in the town. In the evening, an officer came to conduct us thither. How anxiously did we turn our eyes towards Longwood at the moment of our departure! What were our thoughts and sensations as we proceeded along the road! What a wound was inflicted on my heart when, for the last time, I turned to look on Longwood and saw it gradually disappear from my eyes.